Hello everyone, and welcome to Museums Under the Spotlight. I'm Alina Dima, your host, and today we will discover together a breathtaking princely residence that represents a vivid eyewitness, able to tell the story of an entire part of the nation, founded by a series of generations that organized their lives on the functioning of their principles and their ambitions. The Mogosoaia Palace, located close to Bucharest, the capital of Romania, is not only the image of the past, but also the expression of the present and the testimony of a becoming.
Mogosoaia Palace was built between 1698-1702 by Constantin Brâncoveanu, Prince of Wallachia. The construction style is unique in the world, a Romanian Renaissance, a mix of Venetian and Oriental styles. Essentially, a unique combination of local, Byzantine, Italian and Baroque elements, this architectural style is very elegant and well-balanced, using rich decorations for its rock-carved columns and porches. The palace bears the name Mogosoaia of the widow of the Romanian boyar Mogos, who owned the land this splendid piece of art was built on.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the Mogosoaia Palace in this spectacular scenery, and we are going to find out a lot of interesting stories about the princes and princesses here. And together with our host, Loredana Unchiașu, we are going to unravel the history of this magnificent palace. Hello, and thank you so much for having us here today.
Hello, and welcome to our palace, and we are very lucky that you came here and you want to find some interesting things about this beautiful place.
And for us it's truly delightful to be here and to try to uncover the history behind this magnificent palace. And since we are talking about history, I would really like to know, how did the history of the Mogosoaia Palace begin? And of course we should also talk about the family that made this magnificent construction, the Brâncoveanu.
Well, Mogosoaia has a very interesting history. It all began with Brâncoveanu, with a very rich prince. His name was Constantin de Brâncoveanu. Actually, Brâncoveanu was the ruling prince of Wallachia. He is the one who built the palace and this magnificent place in 1702. And he was seduced by the beauty of this estate. He bought it in 1681 and he built at first the white church with St. George's patron. It is a beautiful church. It is an original one. And Brâncoveanu wanted to offer to his family summer residence. Brâncoveanu was the ruling prince of Wallachia between 1688 and 1714. He built a palace in 1702 for his second son Stefan. Here we are inside the royal court from Brâncoveanu's time. Over there we can admire the kuchnia, or the royal kitchen, the structure, the building from there. The kuchnia, according to the architecture of those ancient times, the kitchen was placed very far from the palace in order to prevent fire, to avoid the bad smells. That position had also some disadvantages because the meals, which were very tasty, prepared after the Italian, German and French fashion, were always cold. You can imagine the servants running with the plates. And even the food was very tasty. In that time, the cold became cold or colder in the same time. Brâncoveanu was a very rich man. He built a lot of churches and monasteries in Wallachia during his time. And he was named by the Turks the Prince of Gold. Inside the royal court we can see the ice house from Brâncoveanu's time as well. In winter time, the people from here, they were taken some pieces of ice from the lake, and they used to store over there the food in that time. So it was like a modern refrigerator in that time. So they were very modern even in that time. Brâncoveanu had a beautiful family. He had 4 sons and 7 daughters with his wife, and he offered to each of his children beautiful palaces and estates. And when we will visit the palace, inside we will see some beautiful exhibits from Princess's time. We know that the Brâncoveanu family, they had a very tragic fate. In 1714, the prince, together with his 4 sons and his son-in-law, were arrested by the Turks. They were sent to Istanbul, to Constantinople. They were tortured, and after that they were beheaded. They didn't want to lose their religion, and they didn't want to become Muslims. After his mother, Brâncoveanu belonged to the Cantacuzino family. Even these Cantacuzino were Brâncoveanu's cousins. They wanted his throne, his influence. They betrayed the prince, and in that time, the Sultan Ahmed III accused Brâncoveanu of high treason. So he was a good Christian, but he was hunted for his fortune. I just told you that in that time he was the Prince of Gold.
I believe that it is truly important to emphasize the fact that the martyrdom of Constantin Brâncoveanu, it is really important not only for the history of Christian Romania, because Romania is a Christian Orthodox country. Most of Romania's inhabitants have this faith. So I think that even in the Balkans and in all the Orthodox countries, his name is remembered, and he also became a saint. We celebrate his memory in the Orthodox calendars, just to remind ourselves how important it is to truly have faith in God and devotion and responsibility for one's land, exactly as Constantin Brâncoveanu did. So it's really important to remind people about that, and maybe we can give some details regarding the actual event that took place in Constantinople.
Yes, it's true. In 1714, after the beheading, the heads of the martyrs were put in a spear and they were shown to everyone in Constantinople, and their bodies were thrown into the sea. And after a while, those corpses were recovered from the sea by some fishermen, and they were brought in Wallachia. In 1720, Maria Brâncoveanu, his wife, he succeeded to take them, and she buried them in St. George's Church from the middle of Bucharest. So today in the middle of town there is a beautiful church. So inside of it you will see his grave and of his sons, of his son-in-law. After all, they were sacrificed and they died for their faith in God, and they are considered saints by the Orthodox Church. Actually, each year on 16th of August we commemorate their sacrifice for Christianity.
Here on the domain at Mogosoaia Palace, there is also a beautiful church that was built in the times of Constantin Brâncoveanu with the intention of becoming a princely tomb, which actually never took his owner into the resting place. But let's talk about this church and its construction.
This church, it's a beautiful one. It was built in 1688 by the prince, and after that he built the palace and the other surroundings.
What happened to the estate? What happened to Mogosoaia Palace and the whole domain after Brâncoveanu's tragic death? Who took over?
After 1714, the palace was occupied by the Turks. They confiscated all the furniture from there. They burned the palace, and all those beautiful frescoes that once decorated that place were destroyed in that time. And only after a while the palace was changed into an inn used only for travelers' needs. The last owners of the palace after 1911 were the Bibescu family. So Mogosoaia became a new palace after 1911. In 1911, this palace was bought by the Bibescu family. Prince Bibescu, Prince George Valentin Bibescu, was a very rich man. He was a pilot. In 1911, he bought a palace in the entire estate and offered it as a present to his wife, to Princess Marta Bibescu. It was a beautiful gift, but a very expensive one, because in that time the palace was a ruin, and the Bibescus are the one who restored the palace. They brought architects from Italy, and from their time we can admire today the fireplaces, the inner architecture preserves a lot of original architectural elements from that time.
Constantin Brâncoveanu was the Prince of Gold because he was a very rich prince and also ruler of Wallachia. But what many people don't know are things regarding to his personality and to the fact that he was a true mecena and he was really interested in the emancipation of culture and art. What can you tell me about this part of his life?
Brâncoveanu was a rich man, as you told me, and he encouraged the culture and the arts in that time. He sent a lot of boyars to Padova University, and he encouraged the foundation of royal schools. Actually, he created a Royal Academy of Sfântu Sava from Bucharest. And during his life and his reign, a lot of religious books were printed. And in schools and they were using as languages the Old Greek, the Latin alphabet, and the Slavonic language with the Cyrillic alphabet. So it's true, he was a true mecena of that time.
And considering the fact that he was a ruler, and this estate permitted the holding of many interesting parties or soirees in his time. We're talking about late medieval times. How did a party of such look like in Constantin Brâncoveanu's time?
Brâncoveanu's private secretary was Antonio Maria del Chiaro, and according to his writings, in summer days, the boyars and the prince, surrounded by his family and his guests, they used to sit on the beautiful loggia on the royal terrace. And they used to say that in that time, the golden or silver plates were not taken out when the next dishes were brought in, but piled up along the table. So you can imagine the plate was put on top of the other and so on, that at one time, the guests, even standing up, they couldn't see each other across the table. That was a very old Romanian custom. It was also Brâncoveanu's manner to show everyone that he was a very rich man and he was generous, and he really enjoyed the feasts in that time. And he had the statues, he had the rank, he had everything. After all, he was the Prince of Gold.
Tell me about his children and his relationship to Maria Brâncoveanu, his wife. They really had many children, 4 boys and 7
daughters.
girls.
Yes, yes, it's true. He had 11 children, and most of the people, most of the visitors who came here, wow, they are really impressed. One woman, oh, so many children. He was a good Christian after all. We do not know if he had another children, but these are his official children with his one woman, Maria Brâncoveanu.
But how about the girls? We know about the martyrdom of the boys together with their father, but what was the fate of his daughters?
Actually, in 1714, Brâncoveanu's entire family was arrested by the Turks, but only the boys were killed. I just told you that. And Brâncoveanu's wife and his daughters were kept prisoners, but in 1720 they could escape from their exile and they could come back in Wallachia, and they recovered somehow their lost estates.
In the history of the Mogosoaia Palace, there have been many beautiful and strong women, and one of them is Marta Bibescu, a true symbol. She's an emblematic figure, not only for Mogosoaia, but also for the Romanian literature. And she had a very tumultuous life when it comes to her romantic affairs and escapes, and also to her incredible talent that was recognized also by Marcel Proust. But let's find out some more about her. Who was Marta Bibescu and how was she like? Because everybody seems to tell about her that she was effervescent.
Yes, well, Marta was a princess. It was a beautiful woman. She was a beautiful woman, and she was a famous writer, and she was very lucky because she received this palace as a gift from her husband. Her husband was Prince George Valentin Bibescu. He was a very rich man. He was a pilot. In 1911, he bought the palace and the entire estate and offered it to his wife. The entire palace was a ruin in that time, and the Bibescus were the one who restored the entire place. They brought architects from Venice, and they adorned the palace with very expensive objects and with beautiful fireplaces with Italian marble. So the inner architecture of the palace preserved a lot of original architectural elements from their time. Marta was a beautiful woman, and she was well known as a writer, a famous one. She wrote only in French language, and after that her novels were translated in Romanian. She loved very much this place. During the First World War in 1916, this palace was bombed by the Germans. There were a lot of damages, and Marta was obliged to sell some of her husband's properties for the restoration. And in that time, she used to go to Bucharest almost daily, and together with our queen, with Queen Mary, she took care of the wounded people from the war. In my opinion, she was a beautiful woman, aristocratic princess, but she was a charismatic person in the same time. And she spent a lot of time here at Mogosoaia. She received a lot of Romanian and foreign royal families, and she invited here artists, writers, diplomats, and even among all those famous French writers, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and Marcel Proust were princesses' special guests at the beautiful palace. Marta was known as a famous host of Bucharest in that time, and she invited here Queen Mary and our queen with King Ferdinand, King Ferdinand, and she was a close friend to Queen Mary, and they both love literature and arts and flowers.
When it comes to rumors, rumor has it that even though her and her husband were officially married for a long time, both of them actually lived separate lives, and they did have people who they were fond of besides the marriage. But somehow during those times the convention was for them to stay married. Is that true? Is that how things actually went?
About Marta's life, there were written a lot of books. And in those books, the writers used to say that at the beginning, she really loved her husband. They had one daughter, Valentina, and she was very young when she became the Princess Marta Bibescu. And even she was very young, she wanted to have her own family, but Prince Bibescu was how can I say it? He was a charming prince, and he had a lot of affairs until his marriage. And it's true that they lived some separate lives after a while, because George had a lot of affairs after their marriage, and Marta was surrounded by interesting princes and diplomats and writers, and She had a fabulous life, in my opinion, and she was a very strong woman.
So let's say that in a world like that, full of glamour and luxury and intelligence, it was really hard to resist.
Yes,
an
it's true.
affair.
But she resisted, and she was quite fascinating, in my opinion, because it was she didn't have a very easy life. Even she was very rich, and she was surrounded by wealthy people, and inside of her, in my opinion, she was I cannot say that she was a sad person. She was not happy. She was not very happy inside of her marriage. But she tried to continue her life and to write and to meet interesting persons. And she was invited at the White House, and she met the President Roosevelt from that time. So she was well known around the world.
During the Second World War, the political situation in Romania was getting worse, and Marta Bibescu was forced to leave the country and go to exile, first in Great Britain and then in France. But she always kept in her heart, until her last breath, the sparkling beauty of the landscapes and the walls of her beloved palace in Mogosoaia.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I really hope that you have enjoyed the splendid scenery of the Mogosoaia princely residence and the powerful stories and history behind this picture-perfect landscape. But in order to truly understand what it's like to live like a prince, you must visit this domain. Until next time, remember to make your life a beautiful story.